Many times, Christ himself comes to the operating room to help, and we live in his presence. Doctor witnesses that Christ comes to help in the operating room during difficult situations. Emeritus Professor of Athens Medical School describes case of divine intervention in the operating room. This is by Dr. Panagiotis Dimakakos. I'm translating it from a Greek article. This is written by George Eureka on Diadrastika. The real researcher searches for the truth, and ultimately it's there that he meets God. Such is the example of the Dr. Panagiotis Dimakakos, a peer professor at the Athens Medical School, who notes in the Ark of Orthodoxy, religion and science are twin sisters. They do not conflict, but they are pillars of the building that is said to be true. A fiery Euphrates and a pioneer in the field of vascular surgery, with thousands of operations on his assets, he gained recognition in major medical centers abroad, but returned to establish himself in Greece, and despite his many distinctions, with modesty and emotion, he is confessed to have prayer as his mental weapon before he starts an operation. With his personal care, the room in which the recent saint of the Christian Orthodox Church, Saint Nektarios, was sleeping at the Areteo Hospital, became a place of pilgrimage, while the chapel of the saint in the hospital was painted with a place where he had performed many miracles. From your long experience with the operating table, have you experienced cases of divine intervention? The question was put to the doctor. And he says, there are many examples. I can tell you the case of a 52-year-old patient from Samothrace with 5 children, where his aorta was obstructed. I cleared the aorta and saw that these lesions were progressing to the renal arteries as well. If the kidneys remain for an hour without blood flow and oxygen, they will die. That did not seem to be the case at the time, and it had already been half an hour before I cleared the aorta and closed it. I then realized that I will have a kidney patient who will need dialysis 2 or 3 times a week. It literally bathes me in cold sweat. The younger kids, of course, do not realize anything, and at that time I peer through the mask 3 times in prayer. My sweet Christ, spread out your hands and direct my fingers. As I open the aorta and the vessels are blown out, I blindly take out all the harsh atoms, and in less than half an hour do the most crazy surgery I could do. 5 kids were waiting for him out there, and I did something unorthodox. When we did the intravenous angiography the next day, which was photographing the arteries, I confess that the patient looked not as if he was a surgeon, but as his mother gave birth to him, as if he had never been ill. Then during my visit, I confessed to my new colleagues. I begged, and someone else did. I will never forget that. I crawled through the mask 3 times in prayer. My sweet Jesus, spread out your hands and direct my fingers. Can we talk about incidents that have come back? I remember the example of a patient who had a heart attack and had a recovery time of more than an hour. When he came back with seriousness and satisfaction, he seemed to be actively involved in the whole process. Quote, "Doctor, you had a serious problem with me. You are late and very tired," unquote, she told me and thanked me. Sick people in withdrawal situations, when trying to bring them back to life, seem to be involved in this process. Some testify that they found themselves in a bright and beautiful world. They are satisfied. Others describe details of our medical actions, even discussions at the time of their recovery, as if they were, even though they were under anesthesia, they were with us and listening to every word. Now, the question put to the doctor, have you personally prayed for your patients? The doctor says, I operated a 65-year-old woman on a carotid artery artery in a routine procedure. The patient, when he woke up from the anger, was semi-angry on the one hand, on the arm and the leg, not communicating or saying things inconsistently. In angiography and skull, all seemed perfectly normal. I spoke to his relatives and opened a second time to check. A panel of teachers followed, but no one could answer. We decided to stay in the intensive care unit until the next day in the morning, and in deep anger, I will not forget the date. It was 8th of November 2006, the day of the feast of Saint Nektarios. I couldn't pray because I had a scheduled surgery at 7 a.m. There was alertness in the Church of Saint Nektarios in Neo-Heraclean. I stood for a long time begging the saint and shared, and early in the next morning I opened a small temple. I opened the small chapel we have built for the saint in the hospital. I lit a candle and again asked for his help and went and operated. The patient woke up, had excellent communication with the environment, moved freely around and took her breakfast normally as if nothing had happened, with normal communication with us. Question put to the doctor: did you feel the presence of Saint Nektarios in the hospital of Aratheo? And the doctor says the saint, after permanently settling in the island of Aegina in 1908, rarely abandoned the church there. He even concealed his health problems, silently suffering from physical pain and heavy suffering. However, when his condition worsened, he accepted the doctor's suggestion for admission to the hospital in Athens. Since then, his blessings for the Aratheo Hospital and our university remain high, as he has hosted the great saint of the 20th century. The hospital hosted the great saint of the 20th century for hospitalization. And according to the personal testimony of Dr. Karaplis, the gauzes used in his sleep were fragrant. They emitted a fragrance and a pleasing fragrance and a holy myrrh, and therefore not thrown away, but placed in the earth. He was hospitalized in the ambulance, where a paraplegic patient was hospitalized after the saint was in that ambulance. And since then, shortly after the saint's death, the first of a series of miracles attributed to Saint Nektarios was performed in our hospital. During the change of the sacred relic, the monk named, the nun named Euphemia placed the saint's shirt on the bed of the paraplegic, who suddenly got up and began to walk freely. And since then, the room has the saint's image, the icon, a burning candle, an oil lamp. Since 2000, it has been a place of pilgrimage with no patients hospitalized in that room. It was like a little chapel. My dream was for this place to become a little chapel, and I even had the financial means to do that. But the administration did not want to hear any of that. Immediately after the passing away of Saint Nektarios, the first of a series of miracles occurred in our hospital. During the change of the sacred relics, the Sister Euphemia placed the saint's jersey on the bed of the paraplegic, who suddenly got up and began to walk freely. Many scientists look with disbelief at what cannot be explained in scientific terms. What would you say to them? The doctor says the true scientist searches for the truth because God is truth. It depends on God. He thus becomes a worshipper, a mystic, a disciple. He himself, I confess, for decades now does not operate without prayer, and as a rule, I cleanse with the antiseptic the area of the skin to be operated on, starting with the point of the cross for blessing. In other words, the doctor says on the area that he's going to operate on, he with the antiseptic makes the sign of the cross in order for Christ to bless that area. And the doctor goes on to say, if in fact I find myself in difficult surgeries, I make a mental prayer. I confess to you that Christ himself is often on duty, quote unquote, and we live in his presence. With these testimonies, I can tell every colleague the absolute truth is divine creation. We are dealing with the progress of science, experience, art, courage, and virtue, but it does not belong to us 100%. I may have performed an operation 200,000 times, and after so much experience to get someone involved, a bad one. That's why I personally have prayer as a mental weapon. Illness is a link of religion and science. These two are twin sisters. They do not conflict, but they are pillars of the building that is true. The question put to the doctor, from your long experience, have you met patients who have overcome the clinical problem with their guns of faith, with their weapons of faith? And the doctor says, patients with faith have a special gift. They are serene, calm, full of hope, and prayers gather more power. The miracle, after all, is a product of faith, a gift to those who possess it, a power inexhaustible. The miracle is silent and again achieved by faith, which is neither compulsory nor compulsory, but is based on and emanates from the free will of man. The question put to the doctor, what supplies should a new doctor have? And the doctor says, the beauty of medical science lies in the confidence that the Creator himself has expressed in the science of the doctor of medicine, Hippocrates, in the deaconess of human pain in the Old Testament, quote, and heal the place and build it, Lord, end quote. The doctor is the first and last person to see when he comes and leaves the earth. So in the interim life, his mission is to take care of good quality health, because there is no greater joy than being healthy. We understand how happy a beggar is when he's healthy compared to a sick king. That is why the physician must be an ecumenical euphemist when approaching his sick. A loving father, such as the Lord who created us, with a triple personality, a good scientist, a humanist, and a believer in Christ. If he has these three prerequisites, then he can see the cases we have mentioned with divine intervention in many moments of his life. We have an aging population with 120,000 deaths and only 100,000 births. With Greece in the intensive care unit, we have there are unfortunately 1,000 abortions every morning, he says here. That's disgusting. The question put to him, what do you fear about the crisis in the country? He says, a nation and a country can hope if you excel over old people. If births outweigh deaths. We now have an aging population with 120 deaths and only 100,000 births. And with Greece cooling off in intensive care, we have the 1,000 abortions every day, as he said. And thousands of Greeks are doing this every day, unfortunately. This is, of course, the fastest way for a woman to enter hell. Now, if you look at the fetus's cardiogram, you will see his heart beating from the 4th week. We're talking about murders of people who cannot defend themselves. Look at the numbers. We throw 350,000 lives a year into the sewers. So instead of supporting the family and young couples who are afraid of financial security, we are creating abnormal situations in the family. This is from my translation from the source, the article on Diadrastika. It's on Diadrastika and Filmora, and I'll leave a link below for you for this. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.